Okay, welcome back. Last video I talked about palettes and how they're useful to preset settings for a light show. So you can see here um, that there's a bunch of yellow lines here, and you've probably noticed them from the last videos or whatever. But Lightforge, the way it handles programming. So you want to usually program your cues so that during service you don't have to change. I think we have 60 lights here. That is a very small number. A lot of times people will have, hundreds and hundreds of lights. And you don't want to have to change all of that on the fly. So you would want to program it into cues. And you can see down here that this is a cue list. And each one of these is a cue. And then also, I'm currently on this cue list, and you can see up here, these are the cue lists. So there's multiple cue lists. Excuse me. And right now we have Our God's Alive and Welcome Onward. So, if I click Welcome Onward, it's going to automatically take the first cue of that cue list. But you can see all of these cues have changed down here. If I go back to Our God's Alive, it will show you, the cues for Our God's Alive. But back to these yellow lines, Lightforge, if you change the setting of a light and it's different down in the cue list, it's going to do something. I don't know what it's officially called, but it's gonna essentially take the value you set the light to over the cue list. And that's what it's telling you with these yellow lines. So if I release this back to the cue list, that's this button right here, or it's R, and I've selected everything. So we'll click R and it'll release everything back to the cue list. Notice everything changed back down to what's down here. Now if I change through this, you can see the lights are changing. But say you can see, so take note here, an out cue, for example, the movers are off. But if I turn the movers on just by clicking on them and turning them on down here, we covered that in the first video, now they're going to be on no matter what cue I take. And so what that means is you can see down here, this has a yellow border around it too. That means that the intensity of the movers has been overridden from the cue list. So that is useful if you forget something in a cue list and you need to make sure it's on, or there's a bunch of different uses for it. It's mostly so that if bad stuff happens and you didn't completely program your cue list, you can easily control your light still, and your cue list still is relevant. So with that being said, how do you build a cue? So you'll notice when I release, everything is, there's no yellow lines or anything. So that means it's all down, it's all taking the values that the cue list is telling it. So if I change my lights, say I get the scene exactly how I want it, let's say I'm going to use the 5th song palette to set these lights. This is where palettes comes in. So if I hit 5th song just on these, it's going to put all of these lights to 5th song, but I don't want the house lights to be that dark. I know what 5th song darkness is, so I'm going to put the house lights at 1st song darkness, and then I'll change this to purple, these ones to blue, that one can stay amber, and I'll take those ones to dark blue. So then it's pretty simple. All you do then is you add a cue, and that's this button down here. You add a cue. I'm going to call this test cue. And so you can see now this cue is added right here, and it is exactly how you would have seen it. And so you can take the cue. You press space to take a cue. Arrow keys will go to your next key. So I just put arrow back, and this is arrow forward. They will navigate between your cues, and spacebar will pause and play it. So play, pause, etc. And when you play the cue, it's going to stop at the end of the cue unless follow hold is turned on. So what that means is that if you have a follow cue, it will change to green, but it will automatically take that cue. So if we click follow hold right here, now sound check, I'll take sound check. Normally the cursor would stop right here, but watch. It automatically takes pre-service. And so if this green is here, it will automatically take that cue. That is very useful if you wanted to write a light show to a song or to a click track for the band. You just put the click track or the song down in the audio section. That's this button to add audio. And then you can set your cue length. So to set a cue length, you can see you drag each end. So you drag this end or you drag that end, and that will just set the length of the cue. Keep in mind that is not the fade time of the cue. So if you see right here, I was just scrolling there, and that's how you zoom in and out is the scroll wheel. You can see this gradient right here. That is the fade time. It also says in numbers right there. And you can set that by hovering over the little green, right now it's green triangle right above there. I want you to stop. And then you can drag that and it will change the fade time. This is very useful, I mean, in many, many, many situations. If you don't want the default time to be on a cue, you can change it. So that's the basics of manipulating a cue. But say I'm going to be in test cue, and I forgot to add the ellipsoidal beams because I really wanted some beams in that. So I'll add some ellipsoidal beams. I want to select the cue, and if I want to update it, I can click the update button here. And it's going to ask me add to selected cue or overwrite selected cue. So when we wrote the cue, you can see up here, there's values that are recorded into that cue. And those values are the values that the cue fades to as you take the cue. And if you overwrite the cue, it's going to delete all the values in that cue and only add the values that are not released, as you can see here. It would be the ellipsoidal beams. So if you're just making a minor change to your scene, you always want to add it to the selected cue. That means it'll keep the value that you changed and the value of everything else. So you can see now my ellipsoidal beams are on and my cue has the right colors and intensities in it. So one other thing is that the cue list it's something called a tracking lighting console. So what that means is that if you make a change, if you tell a light to turn on in, say, this cue, and don't tell the light to do anything in any cues after that, it's still going to take the value that it had in this cue. That is very useful as, say, I forgot to put house lights in all of these cues. House lights aren't built into all these cues, so you just add house lights to the first cue. The house lights are on for the entire cue list. So the timeline, it's very important to note that, like, if I make a change, say in pre-service, say I want the blinders to be at full, and I update that, when I take movers off right here, the blinders are going to stay at full. So essentially a cue just tells lights to change. Any lights that a cue does not tell to change will stay at their previous values. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, feel free to ask me questions. So that's kind of a basic overview of the cues down here. Let's look at the a cue list. So essentially a cue list is just a list of these, and you have add, duplicate, delete button. If I wanted to add a new cue list, say we're doing Lord I Need You for the 5th song or something. So I'll add Lord I Need You. Notice down here in this cue list there's nothing there. And if I set the cursor, look, all my lights turn black, all my values everywhere. Movers, all of these values are 0. you start off with a blank slate every new queue list. What that means is that if I don't tell a light to turn on, it's not going to turn on. If I don't tell a light to do anything, it's not going to do anything. And that is honestly a valuable thing. It may not seem like it right now, but it is. So say I want to start this one off. It's the 5th song, so I'll put the entire rig at 5th song, and then I'll just change I want all of these to be pink because I like pink today. And these ones can stay orange. You know, we can make some changes to the movers and do that. Do some stuff like that, and we'll add a queue. Say first queue. So now you can see this queue list. We'll zoom in a little bit. This queue list has a queue now, and it's there. So if I go from the end of welcome onward, so I'm on the last queue here, or any queue this will work with, but if you click on Lord I Need You, it's going to fade from the welcome onward queue to Lord I Need You. It's not going to fade through black, which is really nice. It used to do that, and the developer added that ability to fade through queue lists. So queue lists are very powerful because you can essentially do one for each song. That saves a lot of headache when it comes to trying to organize hundreds of queues that you may be using for one show. So I hope this helps kind of understand the basic layout and programming of queues. Oh, I have one more thing. So you saw here that I had first queue here. If I click on this queue, this panel right here will show me what is in this queue. Notice that here this says 5th song palette, and it has this little green thing under all of this. What that means is that it's taking that value from the 5th song palette, which means if you changed the palette, it's going to update in all of your queues. This is a very valuable thing if you build all of your queues based on a certain palette, find out, or a certain position of, say, your movers. You pointed your movers at a certain position, and then find out they're not going to work there. Instead of rewriting all these queues, you can just change the value of the palette, and it'll update automatically in all the queues. So that is the overview of programming with palettes, programming queues and queue lists in Lightforge.